So that's when I got some coaches, went through an intensive year-long training, completely changed my perception of what I was doing and rewired some belief systems. And that sort of catapulted me into me then finding the love of my life. And then fast forward, once we got engaged, I started getting all these secret DMs from women saying like,
Interesting.
who is he? Does he have a brother?
Hello, my loves, and welcome to another amazing guest episode. This is with one of my friends. Very excited. We are going to talk to you about dating and healthy relationships and what that looks like, and get ready. So without further ado, let me introduce Emmy Hernandez. So, as CEO of Soulmate Love University, Emmy Hernandez specializes in helping independent, high-achieving women find soulmate love, drawing from her own happy marriage to her soulmate, Matt. Emmy hosts the popular Confessions of a Loveaholic podcast, which you can find on whatever podcast app you're listening to this on. So, thank you for joining us, Emmy. I'm excited to have you.
Thank you so much for having me, Heather. I'm super excited to be on your show. Your show has been one of the ones that really inspired me to get on my podcasting journey because yours is amazing. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I know. And I was just on your show recently. So who knows? Maybe these episodes will come out similarly, but they'll have to go over there and check out our other episode together.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So tell us a little bit about how did you become an executive coach who specializes in relationships and dating and helping these high-powered women to find love?
Yeah, so it all started, Heather, and as you know, the story is much longer, but I'm going to give you the cliff notes here.
Yeah.
I was an executive in Silicon Valley, working with a lot of very high-powered people. I was doing some marketing, and then I went into another field, specifically working with startups, and I was working with startups from all over the world. I was hired by different universities in Tunisia, and Uruguay, Berkeley, and Stanford. They would all sort of send me to different places to run these high-powered executive meetings with different business schools. And what happened was I was meeting a lot of incredible people and I was going on a lot of amazing dates. But somehow those were not translating to people I actually wanted to date, or there were a lot of men that just really wanted to control me and wanted me as sort of like their trophy partner. And I just couldn't understand what was going on because I was like, okay, everything else in my life is working. Why am I so bad at the love stuff? Right? So I was like, right? So it was so frustrating. So I finally sort of came to a conclusion that in all the areas that I had gotten good at, that I was proud of, especially public speaking. At this point, I was speaking in front of 10,000 people.
Oh my gosh.
In different countries. So I realized that didn't happen on accident, right? Like I got professional training on how to be a public speaker, how to not be so nervous on those stages. And I realized all of the areas and the skill sets I had acquired in my business realm, I was just kind of winging it when it came to dating and love.
Okay.
And that's when I said, you know what? I don't want to wing this anymore. It's too painful to just wing it, too many heartbreaks. So that's when I got some coaches, went through an intensive year-long training, completely changed my perception of what I was doing and rewired some belief systems. And that sort of catapulted me into me then finding the love of my life. And then fast forward, once we got engaged, I started getting all these secret DMs from women saying like,
interesting.
Who is he? Does he have a brother? Like, can we meet him? And I was like, well, let me help you find your own.
Right.
And so, yeah, that's how it all started. And I realized there was a market for it. And it was like this secret society that I started that's not so secret anymore.
Yeah.
But it all started off as a secret because we weren't supposed to talk about love. We weren't supposed to be yearning for it. So here we are now. It's a full-fledged multiple six-figure business headed towards seven figures. It's just like, how did that happen? I put my story out there for public hearing, and I started realizing there were other women in the same boat.
I mean, so many other women in the same boat. So yeah, I appreciate you kind of just sharing the background on that too. And that like you kind of had to like get serious about it and realize like, how would I expect myself to like know and have all these skills if I've never been taught them before? Because I don't think any of us were really taught that stuff. You know?
We really weren't, right? And
Yeah.
I think it's painful for us to think that we're just supposed to know. Because I think for a lot of us, or most of us, we can have our early memories of our first crush, right? I know my first
Mm-hmm.
crush was in third grade.
So
And
cute.
my first heartbreak was in like sixth grade because this kid I
Mm.
liked, he ended up having another girlfriend, and it was like, oh my god, he
Aw.
doesn't like me.
Yeah.
And I think we all sort of have that level of understanding of like what relationships are, and then what we
Mm-hmm.
see in our own lifetime and with our family dynamics, whether they're in a healthy relationship or not. And then I come from a Mexican household. So
Mm-hmm.
I had two variations that raised me, I'll say, when it comes to
Okay.
love. I had Disney,
Okay.
yes, which a lot of us, are familiar with.
Uh-huh.
But I
Uh-huh.
also grew up with hardcore Mexican telenovelas,
Oh, so
which were,
different.
yes. And the Mexican telenovelas were all about being a damsel in distress.
Okay.
All
Mm-hmm.
about being a damsel in distress. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like being a damsel in distress, so I kind of like rebelled against that and went the other way. And I kind of went into I'm going to be a bitch and kind of like dominate the
Mm-hmm.
situation, which also wasn't very healthy. So either way,
Right.
I wasn't bringing in healthy men.
Uh, that makes sense. Because it's one thing if you're just like, I'm just leaning into my natural power and I'm being empowered versus like, this is maybe even like a protective mechanism, or this is like I don't want to be vulnerable, or it's not safe to be vulnerable. Those are certainly things I've worked on within myself too. But yeah, that makes so much sense. And the Disney stuff also has a lot of damsel in distress storylines, at least the older stuff. They're changing. They're changing now, but yeah.
Yeah, two of my favorites were, one was Little Mermaid,
Yeah.
and what have we learned there? That you have to change who you are in order to find true love, which is, hate to break it to you, not true. But
Right. Not
I see
healthy.
a
Yep.
lot of women like actually living this. They don't see it as, they're living the storyline of the Little Mermaid, but I see it
Right.
happen all the time, like the pick me girls of like they're changing themselves and manipulating themselves into being something that
Yeah.
she thinks a guy wants when that's not who she is. And
Right.
then the one that broke my heart the day that somebody like told me this, and it's so true, was Beauty and the Beast. Like
Okay.
I was just so in love with the whole storyline, right? It was so
Yeah.
romantic, and I
I
really
know.
associated myself with Belle because she didn't want Gaston, right?
Hmm.
She was in love with the library and all these things. And then I realized that it was literally Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
And it shattered my world into a million pieces. And I really resisted that one for a little bit. And when I sat with it, it literally happened to me. I lived that experience.
Wow.
I'm a survivor of Stockholm syndrome from a specific relationship. I have seen it play out as an
Right.
educated woman,
Yep.
as a brilliant woman, as
Yep.
someone who has the financial resources and capacity, and it still happened to me. So that's
Yeah.
why I speak about it now.
I do think that's so important. And you're not the only person that I know personally who has experienced that, who is a smart, successful woman. So let's talk about that for a second. Like, how do you know if you're getting into a toxic situation? And like, what do you need to be able to either quickly, about face and get out of there? Or, if you've been in there for a while to kind of get the strength to leave?
Yeah, so this is where it gets tricky because as I'm learning now, there are 6 to 8 different forms of narcissism.
Mm-hmm.
And they all display very differently. And I am not an expert in this. I'm an expert in covert narcissism because that's the
Mm-hmm.
man that sort of manipulated me into and coerced me into being in a relationship with him, and it
Yeah.
emotionally and psychologically sort
Mm.
of. But there are so many others, right? Like we know a lot of the overt narcissists where we can see in the media and we're like, oh man, like this person is so full of himself or she's so
Right.
full of herself. Like
Right.
those are kind of like the easy ones, but the dangerous ones are the ones who present a different face to you. And those, the
Mm.
one that I got experienced was covert narcissism. So these are some things to be on the lookout for, and don't make the mistakes that I made.
Okay.
Is no matter what relationship you're getting into, in those first 90 days, okay, 90 days is 3 months. That's short time, but still a long time.
Mm-hmm.
In those 3 months, do not make any life altering decisions when you're in a relationship with someone. Okay? Meaning, do not move in with this person. Do not move across the country, or much less across the world for them, or much less to them. Don't decide to get married. Don't decide to purchase a home together. As romantic as all that sounds, in those first 90 days, you're still getting to know someone. And let me tell
For
you the
sure.
difference, right? So, in those first 90 days, if you're really getting along with someone and it continues and it's consistent, awesome, great, right? There's no harm, no foul. Here's the thing, in those first 90 days, narcissists, covert
Mm-hmm.
narcissists, can really
Mm-hmm.
only keep up this facade for around that time. So if they are doing
Okay.
something called love bombing you, so they're being super
Yeah.
kind, super nice,
Yep.
at about the 90, 91, 92 day mark, they will do an about face and
Okay.
start making you feel bad. What does that mean? Maybe they call you and you were busy in a meeting. And when you call back, you're like, hey, babe, how's it going? Why didn't you pick up? Oh, I was just
Mm.
talking to Susie or whatever. We're like, well, I really needed you to pick up. Next time you better pick up. And by this point, you feel a little bit like, like what's going on? And you feel like,
Yeah.
what did I do wrong? And what's happening is they're starting to disempower you, but they won't do that in those first 90 days. Those first 90 days, they will actually go overboard in getting you flowers and purchasing trips and
Mm-hmm.
buying and taking you to your favorite restaurant. So in those first 90 days, we have to be very careful to not go overboard and getting too involved with someone, because we want to see if their behavior is consistent beyond the 90-day mark into like what I have with my husband. We're 7 years and his
Yeah.
behavior and his attitude is consistent the entire time we're together.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. So it's like you need to look for consistency, and you need to realize, because some of us, maybe me, when we're dating, it's like we might be looking out right away, like, okay, are there any and sometimes there are signs that are obvious right away, right?
Sometimes.
Where it's like, okay, this is a no. But I think it is really highlighting the idea that like it takes a while to get to know someone, and it's important to be kind of open enough to give it some time and reserve judgment, I think, both on kind of the, hey, I want to get rid of you, or hey, I'm in love with you sides.
Yes. And you know what? Like, this is another thing. I think some people get confused because you're like, oh, well, Emmy, you knew, right? And like, yes, I knew Matt was special, but I didn't know he was my soulmate right away. And that's very important to discuss,
Mm-hmm.
is that, and you and I were talking a little bit about this offline, but how do you know when someone is your soulmate?
Yeah.
And you won't know right away.
Yeah.
Even for those of you who tell you like, oh, well, you don't understand, there was a special connection. Yes, I have that special connection with my husband. I can tell you many reasons why I know that he's my soulmate, but we still have to keep them grounded to reality. Okay. It can't just be
Right.
this ethereal sort of like feeling. So, an important thing that I did is I did not make any public announcements or introduce him to anyone special until
Mm-hmm.
after 6 months of a committed
Wow.
relationship.
Okay.
Okay. No one on Facebook knew. No one knew anything. Why am I telling you this? Because I had made this error before. I had made this mistake of posting someone way too soon, when too early.
I
And
know.
immature me would then post and then be like, oh, broken up. And it's like, nobody
Right.
needs to know your business. It only makes it worse for you as you're
Right. Right.
navigating,
Right.
this,
Yeah.
this
It's one thing
sort
for
of
like your
dilemma.
close friends to know or something, but yeah,
Yes.
we don't need like public announcements. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And even with my close friend,
Mm-hmm.
when I met Matt, I reached out to my best friend, I think a week or two later,
Okay.
after Matt and I had probably already gone on like 6 to 10 to 12 dates. Okay.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah, they were like back to back to back
Yeah.
in a healthy way, because
Mm-hmm.
I was still living my life and still had my schedule. And so did he.
Mm-hmm.
We just wanted to see each other. So we were making time for each other.
Got it. Got it.
But here's why this call with my best friend was so different than anything else she had heard before from me,
Mm-hmm.
after knowing
Mm-hmm.
me for a decade. So she knew
Mm-hmm.
me very well
Yeah.
and all my stupidity too. I told her, I was like, hey, you know what? I met this guy. he's really cool. We have a lot of really good things in common. He's
Mhm.
not the traditional profession that I would have thought that I would have dated, but it
Mhm.
just feels so good. And I'm just really enjoying getting to know him.
Mhm.
And I don't really see any red flags. I'm just kind of enjoying this and just kind of going with emotions.
Yeah.
And she told me something that I will never forget. And this was 7 years ago. And she still reminds me. And she said, Emmy, this is different. I said, yeah, how
Hmm.
so? Like, I hadn't even recognized it. She's like, this is the first time ever that I've heard you talk about a guy so calmly, so cool, so collected,
Mhm.
and just how you've gotten to learn about his values and he's gotten to learn about yours and that they match. And there's not this, oh my God, I have to tell you, blah, blah, blah. And I told
Right.
her, oh my God, you're right.
Yeah.
And that is Heather, because it was the first time in my life that I had actually met the man that was good for my nervous system
Yeah.
as opposed to created chaos in it, which
Yeah.
was previously perceived as butterflies or like, oh my God, bad boy kind of energy.
Right.
It's like, oh,
Right.
that was just my instincts going run, run, run. But I was like, ooh, I
Mhm.
was running towards them as opposed to away.
That makes so much sense, and I think that often gets confused for chemistry, and people are like, "Oh, it's so exciting. We have amazing chemistry," and it is viewed as a good thing. And I think what you're saying is important because we want to know like what are the feelings like within ourselves that we're kind of looking for. I believe that like our bodies are very smart, like our nervous systems are very smart. And in my experiences dating, I feel like my body has often known something before my mind has. And so I think that's really interesting what you're saying, kind of about the calm love and kind of the regulated nervous system. And I'm like feeling worried. Like, are people going to mistake that for like boring or lack of chemistry?
Oh, I love this. Yes, it's
Yeah.
one of my favorite topics.
Okay.
So here's what's so amazing about it is
Yeah.
that in no way, shape, or form do I want you to take what I'm saying as in like, oh, that means you and your husband don't have chemistry. No, no, no,
Mhm.
quite the opposite.
Mhm.
But chemistry is what I call phase one of a relationship. Like if you don't
Okay.
have that, don't move forward with anything else, right? Like
Okay.
you can have someone who's an incredibly good person, but if you're not attracted to them and they're not attracted to you, it's not gonna like don't do that to yourself, right?
Yeah.
I am extremely attracted to my husband, and that is a very important element. However, if all you have is chemistry and all you have is
Yeah.
lust, then there's nothing else to go forward with. And a lot
Okay.
of people will really push through, go through the mud because they're like, but we have so much chemistry. I'm like,
I
yeah, but
know.
that's all you got, babe. Like,
I
that's
know.
it. Like, well, I
I
can't, you
hear
can have
you.
chemistry with a freaking, tree down the road.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it can't be the only thing. And like, is
Right.
it great to have incredible sex with a person you have incredible chemistry with, but know that that's all it is? Yes. And I actually
Yeah.
encourage my clients to do that in an empowered state, but
Right.
not when they're like, oh, I hope he takes me out on a date after this. If you, okay, you cannot
Right.
go and have sex with someone knowing that there's no more values there involved and he's already giving you that he's super avoidant and hope
Right.
that because you guys had sex maybe he'll fall in love with you. That's
I
not how it
know.
works. That's not how it works, babe. You're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think what you're saying is important in the sense that we need to be honest with ourselves. It's like, yes, be vulnerable, yes, put yourself out there, but don't bury your head in the sand, and ignore the signs that are trying to scream at you. Whether it's those external signs of like he said he doesn't want a relationship or like, your internal signs of like my nervous system is like, on a roller coaster ride. So yeah, I think that makes so much sense. You were starting to say about bad boys a little bit. So that's obviously a thing. I know I for sure had my bad boy phase where like looking back, I was like, oh my God, what was I thinking? And I at least had the intelligence and the awareness at the time to be like, okay, So maybe I can't help this is who I'm attracted to right now, but I'm not going to get into a relationship with them. So that was good. But it was like, it was undeniable. There was a definite phase. There was a lot of people that were like kind of dealing with addictive issues and, you know, not fully available, but, you know, they were just so captivating. So what do we do about that when
Oh my
we're in those
goodness.
phases?
You do the healing work is what you do. I didn't know that this was something that would happen to someone because all I knew, again, no training, no skill set around this. Now I know better, and this is why I share about it.
Right.
But I definitely I can tell you one of my worst bad boy experiences. I was at this event, some gala in San Francisco somewhere, and this guy that I was standing next to started talking to me, and he asked for my number, and I was like, oh, he's like, this guy's really hot. And he turned out we had mutual friends, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So awesome, right? So he
Sounds
took my
good.
number. Everything's good so far, right? It was like at an art event or something. So I was like, oh, you meet cool people there.
Yeah.
Anyway, sure, right? So we went out on a date, and we went out on multiple dates. And I remember every time I saw him, like lots and lots of chemistry, right?
Okay.
But my chemistry was overpowering, like the fact that we really didn't have much in common, like our lifestyles. Like, he worked in a profession that he took zero pride in. And that to me was like a big deal. Where he lived was kind of like a pigsty, and not just like dirty, but I mean like just not put together. And it had nothing to do with lack of resources. It had to do with the lack of care he had for that. Not only that, Heather, I then found out that he was married.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's real bad boy.
Yeah, real bad boy. And not only was he married, he was recently married. They were in their, like, they were newlyweds.
Wow.
Not only that, he had
There's
told
more?
his mom. There's more. He had told his mom about me and how beautiful our relationship was, and that he's never experienced anything like this before. So I was getting all caught up in like, this is really confusing. Like, I have zero respect for women who do this, yet now I was one of these women. And like, just he made one of my birthdays feel super special. And by super special, like, now looking back, I'm like, it wasn't really that special. It was just like, it was actually pretty lazy.
Okay.
So he created this whole web of like making me feel important by still keeping me a secret. And
interesting.
there was one time where he took me on his motorcycle, and I remember I was terrified.
I mean, he checks like every bad boy box.
Yeah, literally. Like, it was
motorcycle, cheating on his new wife.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And let me clarify let me add this to the picture. He looks like a twin or a doppelganger of one of Mexico's most elite and most famous telenovela celebrities. We already talked about my fascination with telenovelas.
Yes, we did. Yes.
Okay, so this guy wasn't like just like A-okay, although like the guy that kidnapped me was just A-okay looking. This bad boy was not just A-okay looking. Like, he was model status.
He was like gorgeous. Yeah.
Absolutely gorgeous.
Okay.
And he knew that.
Okay.
He knew that, and he took advantage of it.
Okay.
Fast forward, I find out, I'm not sure why he told me. Thank goodness he told me that he was, I forgot about the motorcycle. I have to go back to this. I almost died. I almost died on that motorcycle. He gave me like 2 seconds of like training of like, hey, lean with me, not against me. If anybody's ever been on a motorcycle, especially for the first time, you will do the opposite, because if you're leaning this way, you feel like you're going to fall. So I was going this way. He was going over 100 miles an hour.
Oh my God. This guy sounds awful.
He was horrible.
I'm so glad you wound up with Matt. At least I know there's a happy ending here.
Right? Here's how it finally ended. He finally told me that his wife was pregnant. Like, he had just found out. And like, thankfully, something in me went and like, bitch, like, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what the freak are you doing?
Yeah. Like, it's
and
time.
I finally snapped, and I blocked him on everything. But he still called me.
Oh my God.
9 months later, because he promised me he would, and he still wanted to continue. Like, at this point, I was like, so over it. But like, this is how involved I was with the bad boys because of my nervous system
Okay.
that was familiar to me. So it felt
Yeah.
like love.
Yeah.
Chaos was familiar to me. So
Yeah.
when chaos is familiar, it feels like love. But
That
that
is
wasn't love.
true for so many people, the whole chaos thing. And I think we seek it out in different ways. Maybe it's bad boys, maybe it's, having too much going on in our lives or whatever. But like, yeah, I see that. I've been in that where I'm like, I feel like I'm recreating something that I don't need to be recreating, right now. So that makes so much sense. So I mean, if someone's stuck though in that mode where they're like, I know I'm making terrible choices with dating, like how do they get out of that cycle?
Yes. Love this question. And there is hope. Don't worry. Okay.
Yeah.
And I always tell my clients, hope is not a strategy, right? So
That's
first,
true.
hope is not a strategy. It's the first
Yeah.
step, but it's not a
Yeah.
strategy, right? So
Right,
first
right.
is acknowledging that what you're experiencing, that's not what you want. And it doesn't feel
Right.
good. Okay.
Right.
Second, and this is going to be a little bit harder, is recognizing that you deserve better. And why do
Yeah.
I say that it's hard? Because we got to do some healing work in order for you to truly, truly know that. Because so many people are afraid of being alone that they'd rather at least be with someone that's mistreating them. And I can tell you right now, babe, absolutely fucking not. Okay. Being alone
Yeah.
is not that scary, first of all. Like you're empowered with it. And
Mhm.
second, you need to be alone for a little while in order to do the healing work to actually bring in healthy people.
Yeah.
So there is a level of healing work in different modalities. And I have two of my favorites where
Okay.
you need to rewire your blueprint. Okay. So your unconscious mind, and you need to rewire your body, your nervous system. Okay.
Mhm.
And there are multiple ways of doing this. I'm going to start with the nervous system first. Okay. So, to your point, Heather, like those of us who are super strong, hyper independent women who are always in hustle, hustle, hustle mode, guess what? You're going to attract people who create more chaos and put you in hustle mode because your nervous system
Yeah.
is used to that. So, one of my favorite things to require my clients to go do is restorative yoga.
Oh, I love that. I might actually do that after we record today.
Yeah. So yummy. So yummy. And to quote one of my clients who did this for the first time last week, she's like, Emmy, she's like, it was kind of boring. It's just a lot of stretching. No fucking shit, babe. It's supposed to be boring. You're just supposed to stretch and be there. She's like, but we didn't really do anything. It's like, that's the fucking point.
Right.
You need to not do anything
Right.
actively. You need to actively rest because I don't need to tell you to go be this
Yeah.
high level executive. This client that I'm telling you about, she's an executive at a Fortune 50 company. So she's just always go, 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 go. So like, yes, I need you to crave boring, as ridiculous
Yeah.
as that sounds. Not in a
No,
partner.
I have
but
craved
crave-
boring. I get it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's necessary for the healing process. Okay. So
Mhm.
that's one very important element. So I definitely in most cities have restorative yoga or yin,
Yes.
YIN. So go look that up. Mind Body
Yep.
app, one of my favorites. Woo, you can search
Mhm.
directly just for that. Okay.
Mhm.
So now let's go into the unconscious mind. Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
We now know we have enough science to prove that most of the things that we do as adults were belief systems that we established before the age of 5.
That makes sense to me. Like we're brainwashed, and I don't mean that like in a negative way, but it's like we come in somewhat of a blank slate and are programmed by our families and whoever we're exposed to, and then we spend the rest of our lives trying to adjust our programming.
Bingo. Bingo. So what I call it is, do you get mad at your phone every time it does an update? Oh, I do, but
Yeah, I do.
okay, but does it force you to do it anyway?
Well, usually I can delay it. Yeah, but eventually I have to do it.
Bingo, right?
Yeah.
So why is it that we have to do that with our hardware and our phones, but we're not required to do that for our bodies? Our bodies are hardware. But when was the
Yeah.
last time we know we do this consciously, right? But for listeners, when was the last time you consciously upgraded your software, aka
Right.
your brain, your thoughts, your
Yes.
processes, your blueprints?
Yes.
And most of the people I talk to, especially when it comes to love, a lot of the people I work with, when it comes to their business, they have coaches, they get certified, they do all these things. But when it comes to their love life, somehow that's like, oh, well, it's just supposed to happen. Because if it doesn't
Right.
just happen, then it's not real. Bull fucking shit. I call BS.
Right. Yeah.
So what we do is we consciously upgrade the software. And I have two ways of doing that. I'm certified in neuro-linguistic programming, NLP.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have had a specific event where you have had PTSD from this event
Mm-hmm.
or specific relationship, I will do something called scratch the record.
Mm.
And what that is, it rewires your nervous system I will actually take you back to that memory. It'll be one
Mm-hmm.
and done. Never again, we
Mm-hmm.
won't record it. You're never going to relive it.
Mm-hmm.
The reason for that is you're going to relive that scenario for a reason, because we are going to give it a new meaning. And by the time we're done, you're going to be laughing hysterically. And we are making a new memory. So we are superseding the memory
Okay.
and adding a new
Interesting.
one.
Okay. So it's kind
Okay.
of like, let's just go back into the archives and just change what's in that file.
Exactly.
I
Yep.
love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one's super intense. Okay.
Okay.
Only do it with someone who is master certified like myself, because that's not
Okay.
something you just want to mess around with, because that one you are moving around marbles. Like it's
Okay.
intense.
Okay.
Okay? Now I have some other ones where I help my clients change their blueprint and change their DNA. These
Oh,
are called
interesting.
recodes. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
In a recode, what we do is we energetically enter
Mm-hmm.
the mind and the unconscious of the client
Mm-hmm.
with permission. Okay. Everything
Mm-hmm.
is done with consent. Consent is
Love
very
that. We're
important.
big on consent here.
We are very on consent, right? Super important. Even
Yeah.
in healing work and energetic
Yep.
work, you need
Mm-hmm.
consent.
Yep.
And what I do is I pull up what we call your timelines, right? So it might
Mm-hmm.
be like a parallel timeline, a quantum timeline. It might be your timeline of like way before you were born. It may be a
Mm.
past life. It might be something that happened to your great, 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 great grandmother 15 removed,
Yeah.
right? So we have a lot of, if we know that DNA and our genes are passed down in our family lineage,
Mm-hmm.
trauma is passed down too, babe.
It is. There's research proving it. Absolutely.
Yes. So
Mm-hmm.
what's cool is that in recodes, we can go in, and recodes are magnificent because it does not recreate the trauma.
Love
The
that.
client actually never has to go back to it. Client actually
Mm-hmm.
never even knows what it is. Like, how are we supposed to
Mm.
know what happened to our great, 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 great grandmother? I
Right. Right.
don't even know
You
what her
wouldn't.
name is,
Yeah.
right? So we
Right.
don't need to know what it was, but what the recode does, it goes in and finds what the pain and what the block was. It keeps the memory there, but it removes the suffering and it
Mm.
removes the hold it has on you now. So it kind of releases and says, hey, like this was necessary at the time. I don't need it
Yeah.
anymore. Thank you.
Yeah.
As an example, a lot of my clients want to be in a relationship with a man.
Mm-hmm.
However, they have an unconscious belief that all men are cheaters because
Okay. That makes
that's what
sense.
they had in all of it. And they have proof of that because their father cheated, their grandfather cheated, their
Yeah.
great great grandfather.
Yeah.
So it was just something that was just accepted in the society. Okay.
Yeah.
But this client might say, I refuse. I refuse that, Emmy. And I would say,
Hmm.
absolutely, babe. I agree. Right.
Right.
So there's this cognitive dissonance of like, I don't want a cheater, but the energy is so much towards I don't want a cheater that she keeps
Right.
finding cheaters. So he's like, why is this
Yeah.
happening? Because we need to change your energy from I don't want a cheater to I want a loyal man. Now that sounds like a
Yeah.
technicality, but it's not. The
No, it's
command
not.
you give your brain towards I am loyal and my man is loyal, and there's
Mm-hmm.
no, and it's easy to be loyal because all we want is each
Yeah.
other, is very different than, oh, I hope he's not cheating.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we give your brain specific commands that then changes the DNA, that then changes your identity in 9 months.
Okay. That's amazing. And I mean, I know that you are also somebody who has walked the walk with this. Like you mentioned, you did your own healing journey because you lived in Tampa and we hung out. I've met Matt and you guys stayed at my house during the hurricane. So I do want to just mention that because I've been able to witness your relationship, you guys really have a great relationship and you nurture it and you don't take each other for granted. And it's very much, both sided. Like I remember we did our glass blowing class and you were like, I'm going to get Matt a gift certificate. And I was like, just for nothing? That's so cute. So, and I've seen him dote on you and set up your office and like do, very sweet, thoughtful things for you too. So how do people get to that? Like if they've been kind of where you've been on the not so good side, how do they get to that? And how do they kind of, recognize it when they have a good one?
Yeah. So it's definitely a process that
Yeah.
is doable. And
Mm-hmm.
here's what I want you to know, listeners. If your heart yearns for it, that means it's for you in this lifetime.
Love that.
Okay? Because if it weren't for you in this lifetime, you wouldn't be yearning for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that with every ounce and every atom of my being.
Oh,
Okay?
I love that. It's a
I
good
wouldn't be able to
message.
do this work if I didn't believe that.
Okay.
So that we'll start there. Okay? Because I get that question a lot of women who fear like, but what if, I'm not meant to meet him? And it's like, well, you are, right? Like you wouldn't
Yeah.
even be
Yeah.
thinking about him if it wasn't the case. So like, let's start there.
Mm-hmm.
The second is if you're so inclined to look in the mirror. And what I
Mm-hmm.
mean by that is where can you start taking accountability, not blame, judgment, or shame,
Yep. Good
but
distinction.
accountability where you're like,
Yep.
ooh, okay. I realize where maybe I was a bitch to this guy who opened the door, or bitch to this guy who helped me with my luggage just because he offered and I said, I can do it. Be like,
Yeah.
but you can, but he was offering just because he was kind. I still get, when I don't travel with Matt, there are
Mm-hmm.
still men who offer to pick up my luggage. They will be married, sitting right next to their wife
Yeah.
and kids, and the
Yep.
wife will look up with pride. And I say, thank you
Aw.
so much. I really,
Because
this
he's a
literally
good
just
guy.
happened to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
happened to me two
Sweet.
weeks ago. Okay. Because it's not about getting hit on and it's not about you can't do it or the level of competency. It's about where can you choose vulnerability? Where can you choose receiving?
Mm-hmm.
Receiving is a feminine right, is a
Mm-hmm.
feminine yumminess, right? If we don't
Yeah.
learn how to receive and how to ask for our needs to be met in a kind, thoughtful tone, then we're just demanding bitches. Okay. So again,
Mm.
we're like, I would give you completely different advice if we're talking about what you're going to say in the boardroom. Okay. So don't mix this up for business versus love. We're talking about
Yeah.
love here.
Okay.
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 Romantic
Staying on
relationships.
the love track. Yeah.
Staying on the love track because it is very different when you're talking about the boardroom. Okay.
Right.
But when it comes to love, recognizing that there are a lot more good men than there are
Mm-hmm.
bad men. Okay. Just it's easy to talk about the bad guys because it's easy. The good ones don't get media attention. When was the last time you saw my
It's
husband on the news?
true.
My husband's not on the news.
He's not.
Oh, good. Okay, so I just want you to know, like, it's not
Right.
true that the
Right.
world is filled with all these horrible, horrible men. There is
Mm-hmm.
a small percentage of horrible men and a huge percentage of incredible men, women, everything. Okay, you
Mm-hmm.
can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And taking accountability for like, where can I make some efforts to shift in my belief system and what I want to bring
Yeah.
into the world?
Yeah.
And how are you showing up? Right?
Yeah.
Are you showing up as a version of you that is already married, if that's what you choose, but it's
Right.
already with you, already the person that is with your partner? Like, I'll give you an
Yeah.
example. One of the things I teach my clients is if you want to live with your partner, which most of them
Mm-hmm.
do, is how much space is in your closet for them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you sleep on your side of the bed or do you sleep in the middle, sprawled out?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you have a garage, do you park in the middle? Do you park on your side? Like,
Yeah, it's
start taking
interesting.
actions that bring the universe with the command of, like, I am ready and willing. Okay.
Yeah.
So all of this works, and this is going to sound contradictory,
Mm-hmm.
if and when
Mm-hmm.
you know how to be so happy being
Mm-hmm.
single.
Absolutely. I could not agree with you more. I think like all of the truths in growth, I liken them to Chinese finger torture. Where it's really all of the listeners need to know is Chinese finger torture. So it's like your fingers are in the little thing, and when you try really hard, we're like, oh, I don't like this. I hate it. I'm miserable, stuck in here, and you're trying to pull your fingers out so hard, it just doesn't work. But
No.
when you're just like, I'm fine in here, but let's just move a little bit and move a little bit. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, that feels nice. Oh, look, we're free now. You know?
Wow. Is that how that works? I can never get out of those fucking things. Good to know.
But I feel like that's what you're saying. So really just
I
like,
love
just be happy being stuck in your little torture device.
Yes. It's really
Yeah.
healing happens in slowness, not in chaos,
Yeah.
not in going on 5, 7, 12 dates a week,
Right.
Okay.
Oh
It
my
does
gosh.
not happen in you going on a gazillion trips because
Yeah.
you're hoping that there's going to be this fairy tale story where you meet someone in
Because
Jamaica.
that's
Like
so much efforting. That's so much
yes,
efforting.
no.
And I think it often comes from this place of like distrust.
Yes.
It's like I don't trust, so I have to like spring into action and like over effort, you know?
Correct. Like over efforting is not it's not good for you in general and much
It's
less for your
not.
love life, right?
Right.
So it's in these moments of silence and
Mm-hmm.
active rest that I say that's going
Mm-hmm.
to it sounds oxymoronic, right? But it's there's such a thing as active rest just like
Mm-hmm.
restorative yoga
Yep.
and craving your own company.
Yeah.
Because if you don't enjoy your own company, babe, how else is anyone else gonna?
I do think that's important because I know that I've had friends and I've been in places where it's like, oh, it's a numbers game. I just gotta go on this many dates. And it kind of feels like this. It's also more masculine energy, I think, that can be like lots and lots of action. And I know you've mentioned polarities and kind of the idea of like being different in the boardroom. So how does that play in, like the polarity aspect?
Yeah, so the way I describe polarity is in the masculine, feminine, and I do not refer to this as gender. So it's not gendered,
Yeah.
it's not male, female. Masculine, feminine energy, we see it in nature, right? We plant seeds, a tree grows, right?
Yeah.
So there's an action of planting a seed, and
Mm-hmm.
then we would say that's the masculine action, but then
Mm-hmm.
there's a feminine action that is required in order for the tree to come out. And people ignore this part.
Mm.
It requires sunlight. It requires
Mm-hmm.
water and it
Mm-hmm.
requires time. Leave it the
This
fuck
is a great
alone.
analogy.
You
And
like
it's also those are all receiving. The plant isn't like, let me go find the sun. Let me go find the
it?
water source. It's just kind of like there receiving and allowing.
Bingo. Right?
I
So
love it.
that's receiving. And then there's going to be a little bit more of the masculine, right? Because once
Mm-hmm.
it has that in the environment, then it's going to start to punch out. But it
Yeah.
requires those elements first. So what I mean by that is, no, babe, I'm not saying just sit around and read a book for the
Mm-hmm.
next 5 years and never go to an event and never go on the apps and he's just going to show up on your lap. No, 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 honey. Okay. I met my husband on Bumble. Okay.
Yeah.
But I was not efforting, to your point, Heather, right?
Right.
What I was doing is what I call, it's part of my course, enlightened dating. Okay.
Yeah.
You have to do all of the work to feel so good about yourself first, to find out who you are, what are your
Mm-hmm.
core values, what do you
Mm-hmm.
really want? And then once you're so happy being with yourself and you love your company so much, then and only then does it turn into an efforting numbers game. Not before.
Okay.
Some people want to skip that first part. And if it's
Right.
just a numbers game, then you're just repeating the same pattern over and over and over and over again. And then they're like,
Right.
it's just like a hamster on a wheel. Of course it is, because you're doing the
Yeah.
same thing. Like,
Yeah.
what's the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over again,
Mm-hmm.
expecting a different result. You
Right.
can't have a different result if you don't give it a new prompt. Kind of like
Right.
ChatGPT. You put in a shit prompt, you
Yeah.
get a shit response.
Right. You're right. It is. It's the same thing. So it's like if you're going out there with your negative beliefs and thinking, I want a man, but all men are cheaters and having this internal conflict, it's like our thoughts create a reality, you know? So yeah, reprogramming, giving yourself some time to kind of re-incubate and then getting back out there. I love that.
Exactly.
There's so much wisdom you're dropping on us today. I love it. I feel like, yeah, so many knowledge bombs there. That was awesome. So if people are wanting more Emmy in their lives, which I highly recommend, where should they go to find you?
Yes, they can go to my website, emmyhernandez.com, or you can find me on all the socials at Love Coach Emmy. I'm everywhere and nowhere.
Nice.
Yeah.
And we will link to Emmy's website and socials in the show notes, and then especially her podcast. So make sure you go check that out. It's fun, full of fun stories and educational stories. You'll be entertained and you'll learn a few things, just like you did today, hopefully. So yeah, thank you so much for being here, Emmy. This was really fun to have you. And thank you everybody for listening. We will catch you next Monday. Bye. Thank you for listening to the Ask a Sex Therapist podcast. Got a question about spicing things up in the bedroom? Find the answers you're looking for in my Dirty Talk Guide, a free resource for my podcast listeners. Grab yours now at heathershannon.co/dirty talk. Again, that's heathershannon.co/dirty talk. And be sure to tell your partner or friends because everyone has something they would like to ask a sex therapist.